Hi, I'm Missy with On William Street, and we are here to help you become a more confident quilter, from the piecing to the quilting and everything in between. We are now on month 5 of our Mystery Quilt Along. So this month we are going to be working on our Flying Geese blocks for the Mystery Quilt. But the first thing we need to do is we're going to kind of go back to that high school algebra a little bit, where they always told you that it's like we're going through algebra and we're like, how are we going to use this in our lives? Well, we're going to use it in our lives. We actually ended up cutting some of our squares a little bit bigger than they needed to be. We miscalculated, didn't do our algebra quite right. So the first thing we need to do is we need to grab our blue square and our yellow square, and we need to trim them down so that they are 11¼ inches. And then after we do that, we need to take our purple fabric and we need to cut one 11¼ inch square from that purple fabric. And the second thing we need to do is we need to take those 12 6½ inch squares that we cut in month 1, and we need to trim those down to be 5 7/8 inch squares. To make our flying geese, we're going to take our one big square. So this is our 11¼ inch square. And then we're going to use 4 of our little squares for each of the big squares. So we're going to want to just line those up along the corner, and we're doing opposite corners. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our ruler, and you're going to line that up from corner to corner, and we're going to mark that. So I'm just using a pencil. You can use a fabric marking pen, or if you don't have either handy, you can do the fold over method that Kimmy mentioned in one of the previous months, where you just fold the fabric and do a finger crease. But we're going to go ahead and just use a pencil. And because these squares are so big and I don't want my little squares to shift on me as I'm sewing, I'm going to just stick a couple of pins in here just to hold them in place. And then we're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam on each side of this line that we drew. Now that we've got our seam, we're going to trim right there on that line and cut these in half. And then we're going to need to iron. Oh! That actually didn't cut all the way through in a couple of spots. I think we need to get a sharper knife. Switch our blade out. Okay, now that they're cut in half, we're going to take them over to the iron, and we're going to iron them so that the seam back here is going towards the smaller blocks. And the reason that we always recommend ironing flying geese this way for this method is, as we're sewing those flying geese together, after we get them all completed, it's just going to help keep our points where they need to be. Okay, now that we've got our sections ironed, we're going to take one more square, line it up against this corner, and again, we're going to do the same thing. Now that my section is a little bit smaller, I can use my 1 by 12 inch ruler instead of the bigger one. I'm going to draw that line. And then again, we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam on each side of that line. And now that we've got our last square sewn on, we can go ahead and again, cut right on that line. And then same thing, when we go over to the iron to iron this, we want to go ahead and press it up towards the corner of that flying geese. Then you're going to go ahead and you're just going to repeat that same process with the yellow square and the purple square. And now we've got all 12 of our flying geese ready to go. So these flying geese are finishing at 5.5 by 10.5 inches. So now we're going to sew our flying geese, and we're going to sew ours in blue, purple, yellow in a row, but the order doesn't really matter. You can sew them however you want, whatever pattern you would like to as you're completing this row. And we're going to line them up right along the edges. I am going to stick a pin right here in the middle and again down on this edge, just because for me, just makes me feel a little more comfortable with my sewing so that things aren't moving on me. And then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. Now we're going to go ahead and add our yellow, sew it on, and then just continue down until we have the full strip. And it's going to be about 60.5 by 10.5 for this strip. Now that we have all of our flying geese sewn together in one nice long strip, we're going to take this over to the iron, give a really good press, and then we're going to set it aside. And we're going to come back to this in a couple of months as we're putting our quilt together. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can leave comments on the video. You can send us an email as well. And if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so that you are notified every time we post a new video. We do post new videos every week. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter and get email notifications when those videos are available, as well as links to the blog with any additional instructions. And we will see you next week.